Hello, Twitter. I'm going to cover Coinbase becoming a licensed securities broker today. So, cover a couple quick things. First of all, I think Coinbase is a really extraordinary company. I know they get some criticism at times, and I'll get into that in a second, but they have onboarded more people to Bitcoin than anyone else, and they've changed the landscape of this industry. I think that's been a huge net positive. So I get that there's things you can criticize, but I think that the net positive of Coinbase is really huge. You're looking at something like 20 million plus customers. That's a lot of people who found out about Bitcoin and found out about this industry because of Coinbase, or at least Coinbase made it easier, and it does make it. Even now, it still is one of the easiest ways to get into crypto and to buy Bitcoin and other assets. So I think that their importance shouldn't be underestimated. They have some great stats. Their execution has been amazing. I'm in awe of as somebody running small startups and having a lot of friends that run startups and a lot of people being in this industry that I know, and knowing the team at Coinbase. I'm in awe of their ability to execute at this level. There's a lot of pitfalls in this industry. It's very, very hard. As I always say, it's Game of Thrones. Anybody could be stabbing you in the back at any time. It's very hard to attract and retain talent. There's legal issues, there's scaling issues, there's hardware, there's hackers, there's a lot of things. I think Coinbase has done as well as anybody could do, and I'm in awe of their execution ability. Now, common criticisms. There are a few main ones. People criticize how Coinbase acted during the 2x scaling debate. Yes, that's a valid criticism. Those times were hard. I think everybody tried to do the best that they could. And now it's easy to look back and say, well, this group did the wrong thing or right thing. Eric Voorhees, for instance, gets a lot of criticism. And I know Eric well, and I talked to him a lot during this period. And he, like I did, had every interest in just trying to get this thing resolved. And everybody made mistakes. I made a mistake in trying to gather a bunch of people together with some sort of fantasy that I would, help bring people together and they'd come up to some magical agreement. There's a very, very, very complex thing. A lot of companies made mistakes in it. Another criticism that Coinbase gets a lot is that they have anything other than Bitcoin, so ETH and Litecoin. I don't agree with that criticism. Another one is that Coinbase has been sort of on the side of state cooperations, making some positive comments sort of in favor of kind of a more regulated path. And I think that might be a fair criticism. As I said, overall, I'd give them a 10 out of 10 on execution and everything. If I were to give any piece of advice, if they would happen to be listening to me, I would say to embrace the libertarian and cypherpunk roots of this technology, because it is very, very, very important in the way that it works. And I know that is part of the core values of a lot of key people. But I'm very, very cautious of encouraging state actors anywhere or being too eager to cooperate with them, because they're not your friend. They're there to do things which are really at odds to this technology. But anyway. Now the news is that Coinbase is going to become a securities broker, so that's a big deal. There's a few type of licenses I'll go through really quickly, and then I'll get to these questions. And by the way, here's Coinbase's site for anybody who hasn't seen it. And then these are the questions I'll get to in a second. So there's a few licenses. You can be a broker dealer, or a member of a broker-dealer. I had that license for 18 years. That means that you're governed by FINRA, which is a self-regulatory body, but it's legally enforceable. FINRA, if you break FINRA's rules, you're in criminal violation of the law. So it's a very serious regulatory body. It's not quite the same level as the SEC, which is an actual federal enforcement agency that enforces federal law. And if somebody's convicted of SEC violations, they go to federal prison, and it's federal investigators, same level as the FBI, who investigate SEC crimes. And like the FBI, they're relatively small compared to other law enforcement. So FINRA is the larger regulator, and FINRA regulates Merrill Lynch and Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs and UBS and Fidelity and Charles Schwab and I think 450,000 or so professionals in the United States. So FINRA is very, very, very large. So that's what a broker-dealer is. It's a member of FINRA. An RIA, and so I was a FINRA principal for 18 years, so I'm familiar with that license. RIA is called Registered Investment Advisor. That is, there's quite a few of those as well. I'm not sure how many, but in huge numbers, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands in the United States. That allows you to give advice and be compensated for it in certain ways. I would consider it a little lesser license than a broker dealer. Certainly, in what you're capable of doing, you can do a lot less with a FINRA license. Broker dealer, you can do almost everything. With a FINRA broker dealer license. With an RIA, you can really only just charge fee-based, hourly-based advisory fees, and that can get pretty creative. There's a lot of RIAs that are all kinds of different hedge funds and individual managers and things like that. I still have that license, and I've had that for most of my life in some form or another, and I don't really use it much now. My business gravitated away from things that would fall under an RIA, so I don't typically use it. But it's good to, because of some of the work that I'm doing now, we're keeping it. So the other license that Coinbase acquired through acquisitions is an ATS, which is basically a trading system that a license. It's very high level. There's a lot less of these, which enables you to do all kinds of market making activity and matching orders, and basically operate like an exchange. We in crypto tend to use this word exchange to describe what in the conventional world would really be brokers. Okay, so Coinbase and Kraken and Bitfinex are really more like Morgan Stanley and Merrill Lynch, and an exchange would be more like NASDAQ. Okay. But there is no NASDAQ because the blockchain is the NASDAQ, and it does its own settlement. And there's issues with that I've talked about in other videos. So anyway, the market landscape is interesting. I'll mention T0, of course. I'm on the board of T0. T0 is in a similar space. In some ways, we'll end up competing with Coinbase, and in other ways, will not. But T0 is in the same type of space. So I want to disclose that, even though this topic is mainly about Coinbase, because there's a couple questions about T0 that people asked. So here's some questions I'll take from Twitter. Mr. Hodl is laughing about crypto users. Mr. Hodl is about to. I'm going to get a centralized notice from the home office at Bitcoin because I'm dangerously close to being declared of heresy because of my support of altcoins. So Mr. Hodl is, as being a Bitcoin maximalist, is quite distraught about that. But we'll be okay. We're friends. We agree on 99% of things. But yes, I do hold and support some alts. I don't put all my eggs in one basket. As much as I love Bitcoin, it is my majority holding. Joshua asks, what does this mean for the market share and profitability of T0, Polymath, and Harbor? Is the opportunity for securities tokens exchange dominance winner take all, or will there be multiple winners? It's absolutely there will be multiple winners. If we're right about this, and I predicted this a long time ago. I predicted that Coinbase would even go this route. Maybe I don't even know how long they planned it, but I knew this was going. If you've been listening to me for 3 years, this has been the way that it seems to be going, and I think it's a huge market. It's a between 10 and $40 trillion plus market, depending how much of the world gets tokenized. But certainly, even just existing, a fraction of existing publicly traded companies, and a lot of the things that are private, that would, if that becomes tokenized in securities tokens, it's just a massive, massive, massive market. You're talking about multiple firms, a dozen firms replacing the dozen old school players. So you could have any of these companies mentioned become absolutely huge, huge, huge. There's plenty of room, and I think that I'm a big believer that the rising tide lifts all boats. I think that it's great for different companies to work together, even once. That's why I said companies like T0 and Coinbase may compete in some ways, but more likely they're going to be working together. A lot of the brokers now, or the exchanges now, work with each other, And I think that there's going to be a lot of means to cooperate, even better than the old world. And it's not quite as, it's adversarial because you want to get more market share, but it's not as adversarial as conventional brokerage, where the other brokers really want them to fail, not just in market share, but they want the trades to fail and everything else, because everybody sort of for example, in exchanges now, pretty much every exchange has an interest in keeping the coins somewhat stable and not hacked. So nobody, if the top 10 exchanges trading XYZ coin, none of them have an interest in having XYZ have some big disastrous hack that messes everything up. So that's good. They cooperate. Now, Merrill Lynch and Morgan Stanley have very little cooperation like that, other than when it comes to bailouts and things like that. Aaron asked what are potential implications for Ravencoin. I think, like I said, anything working in this space has, potential, certainly potential to lose. It's a risky area. Some people don't even believe this tokenized securities is a real thing. I think it's somewhat validating that Coinbase is looking at it, but it's very risky. So anything can go down. But anybody who's working on this, especially if they've been looking at it a long time, or projects, or open source code and ideas that are focused on this, this sort of is some market validation. How can non-accredited investors position themselves during these times? It seems that Coinbase acquisitions will benefit accredited investors and institutions, from Matt. So, yeah, I understand the question, and I think the reason is because a lot of these platforms and a lot of things talking about tokenization or tokenized securities so far have been focused on accredited investors. That's a function of the law. It's harder to have things that are totally open to the general public, just because there's more laws and more requirements and more legal. For some, I think it's clear, but for some, lack of legal clarity on it and how it can be done. So the good news is I'm pretty sure that the way Coinbase is going with this is they're going to try and make it, they're going to do the harder road and work with issuances that are totally open to the public. So if you're not accredited, you should be able to buy securities tokens just like you can buy Bitcoin in your Coinbase account, not in the not too distant future. And in other places too, other exchanges, competitors that will be doing the same thing. Now, that doesn't mean it's a good opportunity for you. A lot of these are going to be scams. I'd be interested in what implications are for exchanges that are not licensed. Moose Boosta, nice name. If most ICOs are securities, doesn't that mean pretty much every unlicensed exchange is breaking securities law? Yes, they are. How hard is it to get a license? Really hard. What are the punishments for not having one? Going to jail. So those are great questions. So Moose Boosta is asking, okay, so if these ICOs are securities and exchanges are trading these securities, doesn't that mean they're in violation? Yeah, they are. They're in violation of U.S. law. If you're believe me, I was a broker for 18 years, and I've been in the industry for 26 as either a registered advisor or a broker. Trust me on this, and trust any securities attorney or compliance person or anybody in the industry. If you break those laws, you're in very, very serious trouble. You cannot sell securities without a license. I'm as cypherpunk anarchist as the next guy, but unless you expect on being an activist case that goes to jail in protest, you can do that. You can say, hey, I'm going to do this anyway. It'd be the legal equivalent of saying I'm going to sell heroin anyway. You can do it. You can be as anarchist flag waving as you want, but the reality is in the United States that is an extremely serious crime. It's not a matter of saying, we're going to fight the man. It's if you're being a broker and selling securities without a license, you are in extremely serious trouble, even probably more serious trouble than issuing securities without a license. There's serious laws. They're enforced at the federal level. People go to jail for them all the time. It's no joke. How hard is it to get a license? Hard, and especially the ones that Coinbase just acquired. Those are very hard. You pretty much have to acquire them. It takes a long time. I'd like to know your thoughts on what impact this will have on T0's market share and future regulated venues such as Raven. Yeah, I mean, if Ravencoin works, it will be used hopefully by multiple players in this space, which will be hopefully a lot of players. I think there's definitely going to be a big market for securities tokens, and I think all exchanges that are major exchanges are going to go this route. And for T0, I mentioned, yeah. So for market share, this was always going to be a heavily contested race. There's going to be room for multiple brokers, just as there is in the old world system. You know, you don't just have one broker that dominates. You have big ones like Goldman Sachs, but you know there's a lot of big groups that are competitors. And if this becomes a multi-trillion-dollar market, you're going to have a lot of a lot of working together. T0, for example, owns SpeedRoute, which does something like 3% of Wall Street's trades. It's a huge number, 20 million orders a day range. And so SpeedRoute's an existing company. It's been around a long time, and so it cooperates with hundreds of brokers. You know, and so they may compete in certain areas, but they're customers of each other in other areas. Brokers are the biggest customers of other brokers. There's a lot of trading and things back and forth, and some of that is bad. It's the kind of stuff we're trying to displace, but a lot of that is just different specialties. You know, I was, as I mentioned, I was a stockbroker for 18 years. I did do a good number of stock trades, but there was other things I didn't do. I didn't work with hedge funds until I had been in the business for, 16 years or something like that. 15 years was later in my career. Different people have different specialties. I didn't do much bond trading. I didn't do really any bond trading. I bought some bonds, but I wouldn't know that much about bonds. Certainly these people who do laddered bond portfolios, municipal bond portfolios, I had no interest in that, never did it. So there's a lot of different things. So that's why brokers are constantly working. And I don't mean brokers, individuals like I was. I mean firms, brokerage firms are constantly working with each other. Okay, and YouTube live stream, yeah, I'll give it a shot, perhaps. Isn't every token that will make it onto Coinbase massively overvalued as they should be valued? Not necessarily. It depends. It all depends how much you issue. But yeah, it's an interesting thing because I've talked a lot about the potential of this tokenization of securities thing, which sort of worries me a little bit because I also predict that because it's going to be successful, it will be a bit of a gold rush. And like the ICO boom, there's going to be a lot of junk. So just because something's a token and a security doesn't mean it's any better than a token that's not a security. It just means that they're complying with some laws. It doesn't make the economic case much better at all. In a minor way, you could argue that maybe by complying with the laws, they might be more transparent, or it might weed out the very worst of fraud. But the real fraudsters are going to violate the laws anyway. So I'm not a big believer that the laws really do much to protect the consumers anyway. So token securities are going to be just like just like ICOs in many cases, in the sense that being a security is not a very high bar. It's not like, oh wow, I'm a security now, it's okay. There's been numerous securities that have been frauds and have failed. In fact, most big failures are securities, Madoff, Enron, these kind of things. So that's not some sort of protection. So yeah, they will be overvalued. Now that'll be interesting. So it would be good for one of the things my company is working on is working on asset management securities products, which will adjust to the market and not be overvalued because they'll have a dynamic supply. So for example, if you had something that was issued and people put more money into it, that can change the valuation. It's hard to get into. It's not really the topic of this, but anyway, there's ways to deal with that. I'm sure Coinbase will figure it out. Other people have been working on it for years. So congratulations to Coinbase. I think this is cool. I think it's really exciting for the overall ecosystem of tokenized securities, which is something I care a lot about and think is very interesting. Thanks a lot.